3 weeks married, never kissed, never touched, never even slept in the same room. Isabella Cole's husband bought her like property, a cold exchange to clear her father's gambling debts. Victor DeLuca, the city's most dangerous crime lord, made the rules crystal clear. This was business, nothing personal. She was a name on paper, a ghost in his penthouse prison. Then everything changed. One command, one night, one journey that would shatter every wall between them and nearly cost Isabella her life. If you want to see how a contract becomes something far more dangerous, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The penthouse smelled like expensive leather and older money, the kind that didn't ask questions about where it came from. Isabella stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering cityscape, her reflection pale and insubstantial against the darkness beyond. 21 days since she'd signed her name beside Victor DeLuca's in that sterile courthouse room. 21 nights sleeping alone in the guest wing of this pristine cage. She'd counted every single one. The marble floors were always cold beneath her feet, even now in late spring. Everything in Victor's world was cold. The gleaming surfaces, the minimal furniture, the silence that filled rooms like a living thing. He'd left the morning after their wedding without a word. Just a nod from his head of security, Marcus, informing her that Mr. DeLuca had business abroad and she should make herself comfortable. Comfortable, as if comfort were possible when you'd been sold to pay someone else's debts. Isabella wrapped her arms around herself, the silk of her robe whispering against her skin. She'd stopped wearing the clothes her father had hastily packed for her, designer labels he'd bought on credit he couldn't afford, one more layer of pretense in a life built on lies. Instead, she wore simple things she'd found in the penthouse's guest closets. Soft cotton, muted colors, nothing that drew attention. Being invisible had become her survival strategy. The elevator chimed. Isabella's heart stuttered. It was past midnight. The penthouse staff had left hours ago. No one came up here without clearance, without Victor's explicit permission. She turned from the window, her pulse quickening as the private elevator doors slid open. Victor DeLuca stepped into his domain like a king returning to his castle. He was taller than she remembered, broader through the shoulders. 3 weeks hadn't softened the sharp angles of his face or warmed the ice in his gray eyes. His black suit was immaculate despite whatever business had kept him away. His dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone. Handsome in the way a blade was handsome. Beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Isabella had seen him only twice before their wedding. Once at her father's gambling club, where Victor had stood in the shadows while his men collected debts. Once in the lawyer's office, where he'd laid out the terms of their arrangement with the clinical precision of a surgeon. He looked at her now with that same detached assessment, his gaze traveling over her face, her loose hair, the simple robe. Isabella fought the urge to flee. She'd learned young that running from predators only made them chase. "You're still awake." His voice was deep with the faintest trace of the old neighborhood his money and power couldn't quite erase. "I couldn't sleep." The truth, though she didn't owe him that. Victor moved past her toward the bar, his presence filling the space in a way the expensive furniture never could. He poured 2 fingers of scotch into a crystal tumbler, the amber liquid catching the city lights. "Do you drink?" "Not usually." "Smart." He took a measured sip, studying her over the rim of his glass. "Your father was a drunk, among other things." Heat flashed through Isabella's chest. Shame, anger, a toxic mixture of both. "I'm aware of his failings." "Are you?" Victor set down his glass with a precise click. "Because from where I stand, you paid for every single one of them." The observation landed like a physical blow. Isabella lifted her chin, refusing to let him see how deeply it cut. "You made sure of that." Something flickered in his expression, too quick to name, gone before she could process it. "I gave you a choice. You gave me an illusion of choice. Marry you, or watch my father." She stopped, the memory too raw. Her father's broken face when Victor's men had brought him home. The hospital bills she couldn't pay, the threat of worse if the debt wasn't settled. "Or watch your father disappear," Victor finished quietly. "Yes. I'm a bastard, Isabella. I've never pretended otherwise." He moved closer, and Isabella held her ground, though every instinct screamed to retreat. This close, she could smell his cologne. Something dark and complex, cedar and smoke. Could see the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. "Pack a bag," he said. Isabella blinked. "What?" "We're leaving in an hour. Bring enough for 2 weeks. Warm weather clothes." He checked his watch, platinum, understated, probably worth more than her father's house. "Marcus will help you with anything you need." Leaving for where? "Does it matter?" Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're my wife. Where I go, you go." That was the arrangement. The arrangement was that I'd stay here, out of your way. Isabella heard the tremor in her voice and hated it. You said this was business, that I should live my life and you'd live yours. Plans change. Just like that? You disappear for 3 weeks and then show up at midnight ordering me to pack? Anger gave her courage, sharpened her tongue. What am I, Victor? Furniture you move around when the mood strikes? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Victor stepped closer, close enough that Isabella had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze, close enough to see the dangerous glitter in those cold gray eyes. You want to know what you are? His voice was soft, deadly. You're my wife. My responsibility, my problem to solve when rivals start asking questions about why Victor DeLuca would marry some nobody's daughter. You're the piece on the board I need to move right now to protect what's mine. Each word was a calculated strike, designed to wound. Isabella absorbed them, let them settle into her bones alongside every other humiliation of the past 3 weeks. Then I'll pack. She moved a step around him. His hand caught her wrist, not roughly, but firmly enough to stop her. Isabella froze, staring at where his fingers wrapped around her skin. In 3 weeks, this was the first time he'd touched her, the first time she'd felt the heat of another human being since her father had hugged her goodbye before the wedding. Isabella. The way he said her name was different, quieter, almost. She looked up. Victor's expression hadn't softened, but something in his eyes had shifted. This isn't punishment. Where we're going, it's safer than here, for both of us. I don't understand. You don't need to. He released her wrist, but the heat of his touch lingered. Trust me. Trust. The word was laughable, coming from a man who'd bought her like property, who ruled through fear and violence, whose very name made grown men pale. But standing in the dim light of his penthouse, seeing something she couldn't quite name in his face, Isabella realized she didn't have a choice about trust any more than she'd had a choice about marriage. She was Victor DeLuca's wife, for better or worse. And right now, worse was all she could see coming. But the private airport was a revelation of wealth Isabella was still learning to process. Victor's jet waited on the tarmac like a sleek black bird, its interior more luxury hotel than aircraft. Cream leather seats, polished wood paneling, a bedroom in the back that made her chest tight with implications she refused to consider. Marcus had arrived at the penthouse within minutes of Victor's call, helping her pack with the efficient detachment of a man who'd done this many times before. He was older than Victor by perhaps a decade, with sharp, dark eyes that missed nothing and a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. Victor's right hand, she'd learned, his most trusted soldier. Mrs. DeLuca. Marcus nodded to her as she boarded the plane, his formality somehow more respectful than familiar. Your seats forward. We'll be wheels up in 10. Mrs. DeLuca. The name still felt foreign, like a coat that didn't quite fit. Isabella settled into the indicated seat, watching through the window as Victor stood on the tarmac speaking with Marcus. Their conversation was brief, intense. Marcus nodded once, then Victor was climbing the stairs, ducking through the cabin door. He'd changed into dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that made him look less like a crime lord and more like old money on holiday. The effect was disarming, dangerous in a different way. Comfortable? He took the seat across from her, not beside her, still maintaining distance. As much as I can be when I don't know where we're going or why. The Aegean. Victor accepted a drink from the flight attendant, a woman who appeared briefly and then vanished toward the cockpit. We have a house on a private island. A house on a private island. Isabella processed this with the same numb acceptance she'd processed everything since her wedding. Of course he had a private island. Men like Victor DeLuca collected properties like other people collected stamps. And we're going there because I'm taking my wife on a honeymoon. His smile was sharp. That's what newlyweds do, isn't it? The engines began their rising whine. Isabella gripped the armrests as the plane started to move. We both know this isn't a real marriage, don't we? Victor's gaze was steady, unreadable. You signed the papers, took my name, wear my ring. His eyes dropped to her left hand where the platinum band caught the cabin lights. He'd given it to her at the courthouse. No engagement ring, no romantic proposal, just a circle of metal that marked her as his. Seems real enough to me. A business arrangement is still an arrangement. The plane lifted and Isabella's stomach dropped as the ground fell away. You're my wife, Isabella. For as long as this marriage lasts, you'll be treated as such. That means protection, security, and yes, occasionally, a honeymoon. There was something in the way he said it, some edge beneath the words that made Isabella's pulse quicken. She studied his face in the dim cabin light, searching for clues. Victor DeLuca was a man who revealed nothing he didn't want revealed, who wore his power like armor. But armor had weak points, seams where the metal didn't quite meet. What aren't you telling me? She asked quietly. Victor's expression flickered, surprise, perhaps, that she'd asked, that she'd noticed. Many things, most of which you're safer not knowing. That's not an answer. It's the only one you'll get tonight. He stood, moving toward the back of the plane. Get some rest. It's a long flight. Isabella watched him disappear into the bedroom, the door clicking shut with finality. She was alone in the cabin with the hum of engines and the weight of too many questions. Through the window, the city lights were fading, replaced by darkness so complete it felt like flying through a void. She closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind spun through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Victor said this was about appearances, about answering questions from rivals. But men like him didn't make moves for simple reasons. Everything was strategy. Everything was calculated. What game was he playing? And what role had he cast her in? Isabella woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the change in engine pitch that meant descent. She'd fallen asleep despite herself. Her body surrendering to exhaustion, her mind couldn't. Now she straightened in her seat, smoothing her clothes, trying to look less like she'd spent the night curled in a leather chair. Victor emerged from the bedroom looking unfairly refreshed, showered, and dressed in linen pants and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. The casual look should have made him seem less dangerous. It didn't. We're landing in 20 minutes, he took his seat, buckling in. There'll be a helicopter waiting to take us to the island. Of course there would be. Isabella looked out the window at the brilliant blue of the Mediterranean below, the scattered islands like jewels on velvet. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. She'd never left the country before, had barely left the city. Her world had been small by design. Her father's debts kept them trapped, circling the drain. Now she was flying over the Aegean Sea toward a private island with a man who terrified and confused her in equal measure. The landing was smooth. Victor guided her off the plane with a hand at the small of her back, proprietary, possessive, the first voluntary touch since he'd caught her wrist last night. The heat of his palm burned through the thin fabric of her dress. The helicopter was waiting, its blades beginning to turn as they approached. The pilot nodded to Victor, helped Isabella into her seat with careful courtesy. Victor slid in beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched in the confined space. He handed her a headset, his fingers brushing hers. It's about 30 minutes to the island, his voice crackled through the headset. The house is on the north side, private beach, no neighbors for miles. Isolated, alone with him. Isabella swallowed hard as the helicopter lifted, the ground dropping away with stomach-turning speed. Below, the water was impossible shades of blue and turquoise, the kind of beauty that belonged in paintings, not real life. It's gorgeous, she breathed, forgetting for a moment to be guarded. Victor's gaze was on her face, not the view. Yes, it is. Something in his tone made her look at him. Their eyes met, held. Isabella's breath caught at the intensity in his expression. Not cold now, but burning, like she was the view worth watching. The moment stretched, taut as a wire. Then Victor looked away, and the spell broke. Isabella turned back to the window, her heart hammering against her ribs. What was happening? What had changed between last night and now? The island appeared on the horizon, a green jewel rising from sapphire water. As they drew closer, Isabella could make out the white of a large villa sprawling along the clifftop, terraced gardens cascading down toward the beach. It was stunning, impossibly perfect, impossibly far from everything she knew. The helicopter touched down on a landing pad behind the villa. Victor helped her out, his hand firm and sure. And suddenly, they were alone. No Marcus, no staff. Just the two of them and the sound of the sea. Welcome home, Victor said, and there was something dark and satisfied in his smile. For the next 2 weeks, Mrs. DeLuca, it's just you and me. Isabella's pulse jumped. This was what he'd planned, what he'd wanted, to get her alone, away from the city, from witnesses and watchers. But why? She followed him toward the villa, her legs unsteady on the sun-warmed stone. The front entrance opened onto a sprawling great room with glass walls overlooking the sea. White furniture, polished floors, art on the walls that probably cost more than her father's debts. Luxury as casual as breathing. Your room is upstairs, Victor gestured to a sweeping staircase. First door on the right. Mine is across the hall. There's staff quarters on the lower level, but I gave them the next 2 weeks off. So we're completely alone. That bothers you? He moved to the bar, pouring water into a glass. I thought you'd prefer privacy to staff watching your every move. He wasn't wrong. The penthouse staff had been polite but constant, their presence a reminder that she was under observation, a valuable asset to be monitored. But this isolation felt different. More intimate, more dangerous. I'm going to shower and change. She moved toward the stairs. Unless you need something. No. Victor's voice stopped her halfway up. But Isabella? She turned, looking down at him from the landing. He stood in a shaft of sunlight, the glass turning the light molten around him. And for just a moment he looked less like a crime lord and more like a man. Just a man, watching his wife with an expression she couldn't read. "We need to talk, tonight, about why we're really here. The truth, finally." Isabella nodded, not trusting her voice, and fled to the sanctuary of her room. The bedroom was a study in elegant simplicity. White walls, crisp linens, gauze curtains that billowed in the sea breeze. French doors opened onto a private balcony with a view that stole her breath. Nothing but water and sky and the distant curve of other islands on the horizon. Isabella stood on the balcony, letting the wind tangle her hair, trying to process everything. The speed of this change. The isolation. Victor's promise of truth tonight. She felt unmoored, adrift in a life she didn't recognize. A soft knock made her turn. Victor stood in the doorway, not entering, respecting the threshold of her space. He'd changed too. Swim trunks and a loose shirt, feet bare, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. "There's lunch on the terrace if you're hungry." His eyes searched her face. "Are you all right?" The question surprised her. He'd never asked before. Never seemed to care about her comfort or feelings beyond the minimum required to keep his asset functional. "I don't know," she said honestly. "You've turned my world upside down in 24 hours, Victor. I don't know what I am right now." He nodded slowly, as if this was an acceptable answer. "Get settled. We'll talk after lunch. I promise you'll understand everything." "Will I like the answers?" "No." His smile was grim. "But you deserve them anyway." He left her alone with that ominous promise. Isabella showered in the marble bathroom, changed into a simple sundress from the clothes Marcus had packed. When she made her way downstairs, she found the terrace table set with Greek salad, fresh bread, grilled fish that smelled like heaven. Victor was already seated, pouring wine into 2 glasses despite the early hour. He stood when she appeared, pulled out her chair with old-fashioned courtesy that sat strangely on a man who ruled through violence. "Eat," he said. "You barely touched anything on the plane." Isabella realized she was starving. She'd forgotten to eat dinner last night, too anxious to think about food. Now she filled her plate, the first bite of salad bursting with flavors, tomato and cucumber and olives and feta. Real food, not the catered meals at the penthouse. They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds, the clink of silverware and the distant crash of waves. It should have been awkward. Somehow it wasn't. The silence felt almost comfortable, 2 people sharing a meal in the sunshine. "I noticed you before," Victor said suddenly. "Before your father's debts. Before any of this." Isabella's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What?" 6 months ago. You were working at that cafe near the university. I stopped in for coffee." He wasn't looking at her, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "You made my order wrong. Gave me sugar when I'd asked for it black. You were mortified. Apologized 3 times, made it again yourself." She remembered. The tall man in the expensive suit, the way her hands had shaken when she realized her mistake, certain she'd be fired. He'd been patient, kind even. Told her it was fine, these things happened. "That was you," she whispered. "I came back the next day, and the day after. Always ordered the same thing, hoped you'd be working. You never made it wrong again." Victor finally looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. "You were so focused, so careful. Like getting a stranger's coffee right was the most important thing in the world. You treated everyone that way. The businessman, the homeless man who came in for free water, the college kids studying for exams, equal dignity for everyone." Isabella's throat was tight. "I don't understand. You're saying you..." "What? Noticed me at work?" "I'm saying I saw you, really saw you. Your strength, your kindness, even when you were exhausted and your feet hurt and some customer was being an asshole. You never let it break you." His hand reached across the table, fingers brushing hers. "When your father came to me with his debts, when my men told me he had a daughter, I knew it was you before I saw the file. I knew." The world tilted. Isabella pulled her hand back, standing so fast her chair scraped. No, you don't get to make this romantic. You bought me, Victor. You used my father's debts to force me into marriage." "I know." He stood too, moving around the table. "I did. And I'd do it again because leaving you in that situation with those debts hanging over your head would have destroyed you. Other people would have come for payment, Isabella. People with far less restraint than me." "So you're a hero?" Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "My knight in shining armor who saved me by making me his property?" "I never said I was a hero." Victor's voice was hard now, that flash of vulnerability gone. "I'm a criminal, a killer. I've done things that would give you nightmares, but I also protect what's mine. And whether you like it or not, you're mine now. I'm a person, not a possession. Then act like it." The words cracked like a whip. You've spent 3 weeks living like a ghost in my home. Silent, invisible, scared. That's not the woman I saw serving coffee with her head held high. That's not the woman who told off that drunk customer for grabbing her ass. Where is she, Isabella? Because I married her, not this frightened girl who can't meet my eyes. The accusation stung because it was true. Isabella had made herself small, quiet, insignificant, survival strategy, self-preservation, but also surrender.
You want to know where she is?
Isabella's voice shook with rage and something fiercer. She died in that courthouse when she signed her life away. You killed her, Victor. This is what's left. The words hung between them, sharp as knives. Victor's expression went carefully blank, that armor slamming back into place. When he spoke, his voice was controlled, empty. I brought you here to tell you the truth, to explain why this marriage needed to happen and why we needed to disappear for a while. He moved to the terrace railing, his back to her. 3 months ago, one of my rivals started making moves. Alexei Volkov, Russian mob, very ambitious, very dangerous. He's been testing my territory, trying to find weaknesses. Isabella's anger cooled to dread. What does that have to do with me? Everything, because the moment we married, you became my biggest weakness. Victor turned to face her. Volkov will come for you, Isabella. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually he'll figure out that hurting you is how he hurts me, and he'll use every resource at his disposal to make it happen. The Mediterranean sun suddenly felt cold. Isabella wrapped her arms around herself. So bringing me here is about keeping you safe while I handle the Volkov situation. This island is secure, protected. No one knows about it except Marcus and a handful of people I trust with my life. His eyes were fierce, burning. I need 2 weeks to make sure certain arrangements are in place, to make sure that when we go back, you'll be protected. Always. Why? The question came out small, broken. Why do you care? This was supposed to be business. Victor crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands framing her face with surprising gentleness. Isabella froze, her heart thundering as he leaned close, his forehead nearly touching hers, because somewhere between that first cup of wrong coffee and watching you sign our marriage certificate, it stopped being business. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. Because you're brave and strong and kind in a world that tried to beat all of those things out of you. Because when I look at you, I see something worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth... He stopped, the words catching. Isabella stared up at him, seeing past the armor to the man beneath. The one who'd noticed her when she was invisible to everyone else. Who'd married her not just to erase debts, but to shield her from worse predators. Worth what? She whispered. Everything, Victor said roughly. You're worth everything, Isabella, and I'll burn the whole world down before I let anyone hurt you. Then his mouth was on hers, and Isabella's world exploded into sensation. His lips were firm, demanding, tasting like wine and sunshine, and promises too dangerous to believe. Her hands came up to his chest, to push him away, to pull him closer. She didn't know, and felt his heart hammering against her palm. He was afraid. This powerful, dangerous man was afraid. The realization undid her. Isabella kissed him back, pouring 3 weeks of loneliness and confusion and desperate need into it. Victor groaned against her mouth, his arms banding around her waist, pulling her flush against him. Heat flooded through her, want and terror braiding together until she couldn't separate them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isabella saw her own shock reflected in his eyes. That wasn't supposed to happen, Victor said, but he didn't let her go. No. Isabella's fingers curled in his shirt. But it did. Isabella, his voice was rough, wrecked. If we cross this line, there's no going back. This marriage becomes real. You become mine in every way that matters. Maybe I already am. The admission scared her, but she said it anyway. Maybe I was from the moment you saw me, really saw me. Victor's kiss this time was slower, deeper, a claiming that left no doubt about his intentions. When he lifted her into his arms, Isabella didn't protest. When he carried her inside up the stairs to his room instead of hers, she buried her face in his neck and held on tight. The rules had changed, the walls had fallen, and whatever came next, they would face it together, husband and wife, protector and protected, 2 people finding something real in a marriage built on lies. The afternoon sun painted golden stripes across Victor's bed as he laid her down with infinite care, his eyes dark with desire and something deeper, something that looked terrifyingly like love. Last chance, he murmured against her lips. Tell me to stop, and I will. Tell me this isn't what you want. Isabella looked up at the man who'd bought her freedom with a prison, who'd noticed her when she was no one, who'd promised to protect her even if it cost him everything. the man whose kiss had woken something fierce and hungry inside her. "Don't stop," she whispered. "Don't you dare stop." And Victor smiled, really smiled, transformation and tenderness, before claiming his wife in every way that mattered, turning their paper marriage into something binding and true and utterly unbreakable. Outside, the sea crashed against the cliffs, and the world spun on. But inside that sun-soaked room, Isabella Cole became Isabella DeLuca in the truest sense, and nothing would ever be the same. Isabella woke to the sound of waves and the unfamiliar warmth of another body beside her. For a disoriented moment, she forgot where she was, forgot everything except the solid heat of Victor's chest beneath her cheek, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her ear, the weight of his arm draped across her waist. Then memory flooded back in a rush that made her breath catch. Yesterday, the terrace, his confession, the kiss that had shattered every careful wall between them. And after, her face burned. She'd given herself to him completely, held nothing back, let him see every vulnerable part of her she'd spent 3 weeks hiding, and he'd been reverent, demanding, terrifyingly thorough in claiming what she'd offered. "You're awake." Victor's voice was rough with sleep, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I can feel you thinking." Isabella lifted her head to look at him. Morning light streamed through the gauze curtains, painting him in shades of gold and shadow. His dark hair was tousled, his jaw shadowed with stubble, those severe features softened by sleep and satisfaction. He looked younger, more human, less like the untouchable crime lord who'd bought her in a courthouse. "I don't know what we are now," she admitted quietly, "after yesterday." Victor's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her lower lip with devastating tenderness. "We're husband and wife. Finally, truly. It's not that simple, isn't it?" He shifted, rolling to brace himself above her, his weight supported on his forearms. The sheet pooled at his waist, revealing the hard planes of his chest, the scars that mapped a violent history across his skin. "You're mine, Isabella. I'm yours. Everything else is just details." She wanted to believe it could be that clean, that straightforward, but doubt crept in with the morning light, cold and insistent. "You said yourself I am your weakness now, that bringing me here was about keeping me safe from your enemies." "Yes." No hesitation, no pretty lies. "So this," she gestured between them, the tangled sheets, the evidence of what they'd shared. "This makes me even more vulnerable, doesn't it?" Victor's expression went carefully neutral, that armor she'd seen him wear sliding back into place. He rolled away, sitting on the edge of the bed with his back to her. The distance felt like a chasm. "Get dressed," he said, his voice flat. "We should eat." Isabella pulled the sheet around herself, stung by the sudden cold in his tone. "Victor, I'll meet you on the terrace in 20 minutes. He stood, pulling on his discarded pants with sharp, controlled movements. "There are things we need to discuss, plans I need to explain." Then he was gone, the bedroom door closing with quiet finality behind him. Isabella stared at the empty space where he'd been, her chest tight with confusion and something that felt dangerously like hurt. What had just happened? What had she said to make him retreat so completely? She showered quickly, trying to wash away the ache of uncertainty. The bathroom mirror showed her a stranger, a woman with kiss-swollen lips and marks on her throat where Victor's mouth had claimed her. Evidence of passion, of possession, of a night that had changed everything. Or had it changed anything at all? Isabella, dressed in white linen pants and a soft blue top, braided her damp hair with shaking fingers. When she made her way downstairs, she found the terrace table set for breakfast. Fresh fruit, yogurt, warm bread, strong coffee. Victor stood at the railing, his hands braced on the stone, staring out at the endless blue of the Mediterranean. He'd showered too, changed into dark jeans and a white shirt left unbuttoned at the collar. Professional distance wrapped around him like a shield. When he turned at the sound of her footsteps, his expression was unreadable. "Sit. Eat." He moved to the table, poured coffee into her cup with the careful courtesy of a stranger. "You'll need your strength." Isabella obeyed, though her appetite had fled. The coffee was bitter on her tongue, the silence between them worse. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. "Talk to me, please. Tell me what's wrong." Victor's jaw tightened. He set down his cup with precise control. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's exactly as it should be." Liar. The word came out sharper than she intended. "You're acting like last night didn't happen, like I'm back to being just a responsibility you need to manage." "You are a responsibility." His eyes met hers, cold and remote. "My responsibility. One I take very seriously." "Is that all I am to you?" Isabella's voice cracked despite her best effort to keep it steady. "After everything you said yesterday? After I lost control and complicated an already dangerous situation?" Victor stood abruptly, his chair scraping across stone. "Yes, Isabella. After I forgot why we're here and what's at stake and let myself touch you when I swore I wouldn't. The words landed like blows. Isabella stood too, her hands clenched into fists. You're regretting it. Last night. Us. I'm regretting being selfish enough to make you a bigger target than you already were. He turned away, his shoulders rigid with tension. Volkov has eyes everywhere. If word gets back that this marriage became real, that I actually care about you, you'd have to admit you're human, Isabella finished quietly. That you can feel something besides cold calculation. That's what terrifies you, isn't it? Not Volkov. Not the danger. The fact that you let yourself want something. Want me. The accusation hung in the air between them. Victor's hands gripped the railing hard enough to whiten his knuckles. When he spoke, his voice was rough, raw. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I? Isabella moved closer, driven by anger and hurt and desperate need to crack that armor. You're so afraid of being vulnerable that you'd rather push me away than admit yesterday meant something to you, that I mean something to you. Of course you mean something to me. He whirled to face her, and the fury in his eyes stole her breath. Why do you think I married you? Why do you think I brought you here instead of leaving you in that penthouse where you'd be safer without my constant presence, reminding every rival I have that I have something to lose? Then why are you acting like touching me was a mistake? Because it was. The confession exploded out of him. Because every moment I spend with you, every time I look at you or hear your voice or feel you in my arms, I want more. I want everything. And wanting makes me weak. Wanting makes me reckless. Wanting makes me the kind of man who would burn his empire to the ground just to keep you safe. And that's... He stopped, the words catching. Isabella stared at him, seeing the truth written in every rigid line of his body. The fear. The desire. The terrible vulnerability of a man who'd built his entire life on control, discovering he had none where she was concerned. That's what terrifies you, she whispered. How much you care. Yes. The admission came out broken. I've spent 15 years building power, Isabella. Creating an empire where I answer to no one, where nothing can touch me. And then you walked into my life pouring coffee wrong and smiling at homeless people and treating everyone like they mattered, and suddenly none of it meant anything. Suddenly all I could think about was keeping you safe. Keeping you mine. He crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands framing her face with desperate tenderness. You undo me. You make me weak, and I hate it, and I need it, and I don't know how to reconcile those things. Isabella's hands came up to cover his, holding them against her cheeks. Maybe you're not supposed to reconcile them. Maybe you're just supposed to feel them. I don't know how. The confession was barely a whisper. I don't know how to be what you need and still keep you alive. Then learn. She turned her face to press a kiss against his palm. We'll learn together. But don't shut me out, Victor. Don't make me invisible again just because it's easier than facing what's between us. His kiss was an answer, fierce and claiming and edged with desperation. Isabella kissed him back just as hard, pouring forgiveness and understanding and her own terrifying need into it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. I don't deserve you, he said roughly. Probably not. Isabella managed a shaky smile. But you're stuck with me anyway. That was the deal, remember? For better or worse. This is definitely worse. But there was warmth in his voice now, that armor cracking to let her in. Come on. There's something I want to show you. He took her hand, simple, easy, like it was the most natural thing in the world, and led her down the terrace steps toward the beach. The sand was white and pristine, the water so clear Isabella could see schools of fish darting through the shallows. Paradise. If paradise came with armed guards and dangerous secrets. Victor pulled her along the shoreline, their footprints disappearing behind them in the tide. Around a rocky outcropping, the beach opened into a small cove protected on 3 sides by limestone cliffs. A boat was pulled up on the sand, sleek and fast, built for speed rather than leisure. This is our exit strategy, Victor said, all business now. If anything happens, if there's any threat to the island, you take this boat and head due west. There's a marina on Santorini, 30 miles from here. In the glove box, there's cash, documents, everything you'd need to disappear. Isabella's stomach dropped. You're planning for me to run. I'm planning for every contingency. His grip on her hand tightened. Marcus will send a coded message if there's trouble. 3 words. The eagle flies. If you receive that message, you don't wait. You don't look back. You get in this boat and you run. Well, what about you? I'll handle whatever comes. His voice was flat, final. But you'll be safe. That's all that matters. No. Isabella pulled her hand free, anger sparking hot in her chest. That's not all that matters. You matter. This, she gestured between them, matters. I'm not running away and leaving you to face danger alone. You will if I order you to. I'm your wife, not your soldier. She stepped closer, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. You don't get to make unilateral decisions about my safety anymore. Not after last night. Not after what you told me about caring. Victor's expression went dangerous. Isabella, no. You listen to me. Her voice shook, but she pushed through. I've spent my whole life being powerless. My father controlled every aspect of my existence through his debts and his drinking. Then you controlled it through this marriage. I'm done being a piece moved around a board by men who think they know better. This isn't about control. This is about keeping you alive. Then keep us both alive. The words burst out of her, raw with emotion. Figure out how to protect me without sacrificing yourself. Because I'm telling you right now, Victor DeLuca, if you think I'm going to sail away to safety while you die for me, you're wrong. I'll stay. I'll fight. I'll do whatever it takes, but I won't lose you. Not now. Not after... Her voice broke. Victor stared at her, something shifting in his expression. Surprise, wonder, and beneath it all, a tenderness that made her chest ache. You'd really stay, he said quietly, even knowing what could happen. Yes. No hesitation. Because apparently somewhere between the courthouse and this island, I stopped just being your wife on paper. I became your wife in every way that matters, and wives don't abandon their husbands when things get dangerous. Victor pulled her into his arms so fast it drove the air from her lungs. He held her tight, his face buried in her hair, his whole body trembling with suppressed emotion. Isabella wrapped her arms around him and held on just as fiercely. You're going to give me a heart attack, he muttered against her temple. Between your stubbornness and your bravery and your complete inability to do what's good for you. Marrying you probably wasn't good for me either, but here we are. His laugh was startled, genuine. Fair point. He pulled back enough to look at her, his hands framing her face. All right, we do this together. No more exit strategies unless they include both of us. Deal? Deal. Isabella rose on her toes to kiss him, soft and sweet. Now tell me the real plan, the one where we both survive. They walked back to the villa hand in hand, and this time Victor didn't let go. On the terrace, he spread out maps and documents, explaining the intricate web of security he'd built around her. The island had cameras hidden in the cliffs, motion sensors along the beaches, a panic room built into the villa's foundation. Marcus checked in twice daily via encrypted satellite phone. Victor's most trusted men were positioned at strategic points throughout the Aegean, watching for any sign of Volkov's movement. He doesn't know about this place, Victor said, tracing the island's outline on the map. No one does except Marcus and my head of security, Dmitri. As long as we stay here, we're invisible. And after 2 weeks? After 2 weeks, the pieces I've been moving will be in place. Volkov will have bigger problems than targeting my wife. I'll make sure of it. His smile was sharp, dangerous. I'm very good at creating problems for people who threaten what's mine. Isabella studied the maps, the carefully drawn lines of defense and escape. Victor's world was one of constant calculation, where every relationship was a transaction and every vulnerability a weakness to exploit. But he was trying to change that. For her. With her. Teach me, she said suddenly. Victor looked up, surprised. Teach you what? How to survive in your world, how to protect myself, how to shoot, how to fight, how to recognize threats. She met his gaze steadily. If I'm going to be your wife, really be your wife, I need to be more than a liability. I need to be a partner. Something fierce and proud flashed in his eyes. You're serious? Completely. You said you saw my strength before all this. Well, I want to be strong again. I want to be someone who stands beside you, not behind you. Victor stood, moving around the table to pull her to her feet. His hand settled on her waist, his expression intense. You're already strong, Isabella. You've survived things that would break most people. But if you want to learn how to fight back... His smile turned predatory. Then I'll teach you everything I know. They started that afternoon. Victor cleared furniture from the villa's great room, creating an open space on the polished floors. He'd changed into workout clothes, all lean muscle and contained power. Isabella wore leggings and a tank top, feeling simultaneously vulnerable and determined. First lesson, Victor said, circling her slowly. Awareness. Most people go through life oblivious to their surroundings. They don't notice the exits, the potential weapons, the people watching them. You need to see everything. He moved without warning, grabbing her from behind, one arm around her waist and the other over her mouth. Isabella yelped, instinctively struggling against his hold. What did you do wrong? He asked, his voice calm against her ear. I didn't see you coming. Exactly. He released her, stepping back. Again. This time, stay aware. They practiced for hours. Victor teaching her to read body language, to track movement in her peripheral vision, to notice when someone paid too much attention. Then he moved on to basic self-defense, how to break a hold, where to strike to cause maximum damage, how to use her smaller size as an advantage rather than a weakness. Isabella threw herself into it with desperate focus. Every technique Victor showed her, every trick and tactic, was a piece of armor against the helplessness that had defined her life. She was bruised and exhausted by the time the sun began to set, but she felt more alive than she had in years. Enough! Victor caught her wrist as she tried to practice another escape. You're dead on your feet. I can keep going. I know you can, but you need rest. He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her sweat-damp forehead. You did well today. Better than well. You're a natural. Isabella leaned into him, letting his strength support her tired body. Will it be enough? If Volkov comes? It'll be enough to give you a fighting chance. That's all anyone gets. His arms tightened around her. But he won't come. Not here. I promise. They showered, separately, because Victor insisted she needed rest more than she needed him, and met for dinner on the terrace as the sky blazed orange and pink. The staff had left prepared meals in the kitchen before their departure, and Victor proved surprisingly competent at reheating food and opening wine. You cook? Isabella asked, watching him plate grilled lamb and roasted vegetables with casual efficiency. I survived 15 years before I had money for staff. You learn or you starve. He set her plate in front of her, then settled into his own chair. My mother taught me the basics before she died. Said a man who couldn't feed himself was useless. It was the first time he'd mentioned his mother. Isabella filed the information away carefully, recognizing it for what it was. Trust, vulnerability, a piece of himself offered freely. How old were you when she died? 12. Victor's voice was flat, emotionless. Cancer. No insurance, no treatment options. She suffered for months before the end. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me valuable lessons about power and who has it. He took a long drink of wine. I swore I'd never be that helpless again. That's why I built what I built, so I'd always have enough power to protect what mattered. And now? Isabella asked quietly. What matters now? Victor's eyes met hers across the table, burning with an intensity that stole her breath. You. You matter more than anything I've ever built. More than the empire, the money, the power. All of it is meaningless if I can't keep you safe. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Isabella reached across the table, her hand covering his. Then we'll keep each other safe. Together. His fingers threaded through hers, holding tight. They finished dinner in comfortable silence, the kind of quiet that spoke of growing intimacy rather than awkward distance. After, they walked along the beach under a sky thick with stars, waves washing over their bare feet. Tell me something true, Isabella said, her head resting on Victor's shoulder. Something you've never told anyone else. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I was scared. The day we got married. Terrified, actually. Isabella pulled back to look at him. Of what? Of how much I wanted it to be real. His smile was crooked, self-deprecating. I told myself it was just business. Just a strategic move to protect you and neutralize your father's debts. But standing there in that courthouse, watching you sign your name next to mine, I wanted it to mean something, wanted you to want it too. I was terrified too, Isabella admitted, of you, of what my life would become, of being trapped in a marriage with a stranger who controlled everything. Are you still afraid? She considered the question carefully, honestly. Yes, but not of you anymore. I'm afraid of losing this, losing us before we've even figured out what we are. Victor stopped walking, turning to face her fully. The moonlight painted him in silver and shadow, beautiful and dangerous, and entirely hers. You won't lose me. I don't care what threats come, what enemies surface. You're mine, Isabella, and I protect what's mine with everything I have. Even if it costs you your empire? Even then, no hesitation. The empire is just power. You're the reason to use it. Isabella kissed him under the stars, pouring every complicated emotion into it, gratitude, desire, the terrifying beginning of something deeper. Victor lifted her into his arms, carrying her back toward the villa like she weighed nothing. This time, when he laid her down in his bed, there was no desperation, no frantic claiming, just slow, reverent exploration, learning each other's bodies with the patience of people who had time, building something that felt less like possession and more like partnership. After, wrapped in sheets and each other, Isabella traced the scars on Victor's chest, a roadmap of violence survived, battles fought. Tell me about these. Most are from my early days, when I was young and stupid and thought being fearless meant being reckless. His fingers combed through her hair, gentle and soothing. This one, he guided her hand to a long scar along his ribs, was from a man who thought killing me would earn him respect. He learned otherwise. Is he dead? Yes. No apology in his voice. In my world, Isabella, you don't get second chances. People who come for me end up in the ground. She should be horrified, should recoil from the casual admission of murder. Instead, she felt a fierce protectiveness toward this man who'd survived so much, who'd built himself from nothing into something unbreakable. Good. Anyone who tries to hurt you deserves whatever they get. Victor's laugh rumbled through his chest. Careful, Mrs. DeLuca. You're starting to sound like a crime lord's wife. Maybe I am one. Isabella propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. Maybe that's not such a terrible thing to be. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her lips. You're remarkable. You know that? I'm ordinary. Just a girl who made coffee for a living. No. His voice was fierce. You're extraordinary. You're brave and kind and stronger than you know. And I'm going to spend every day proving to you that you're worth more than your father ever let you believe. Tears burned Isabella's eyes. She blinked them back, but not before Victor saw. He pulled her down into his arms, holding her while she cried, for the girl she'd been, for the woman she was becoming, for the terrifying beauty of being truly seen by someone who mattered. When the tears finally stopped, Isabella felt lighter, cleaner, like something heavy she'd carried for years had finally been set down. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. For what? For seeing me, for choosing me, for making me believe I could be more than just someone's debt or obligation. Victor's arms tightened around her. You were always more, Isabella. Always. I just gave you the space to remember it. They fell asleep tangled together, the sound of waves a constant rhythm outside the window. And for the first time since her wedding day, Isabella slept without fear, without nightmares, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of a man who'd promised to burn the world down to keep her safe, in the beginning of a love that would be tested in ways neither of them could yet imagine, but strong enough, fierce enough to survive whatever storm was coming. The days blurred together in a haze of sunlight and salt water, training sessions that left Isabella bruised but stronger, and nights spent learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with combat. By the end of the first week, she could disarm a knife attack, identify 3 exits in any room without thinking, and read the subtle tells that indicated when Victor was worried despite his controlled exterior. That last skill proved most valuable on the 8th morning, when she woke to find his side of the bed empty and the satellite phone's red light blinking in the pre-dawn darkness. Isabella's heart kicked hard against her ribs. She grabbed one of Victor's shirts from the chair, pulling it on as she padded barefoot through the villa. She found him on the terrace, the phone pressed to his ear, his back rigid with tension. How many? His voice was ice. When? A pause, then, no, absolutely not. You tell Dimitri to hold position and wait for my orders. I don't care what the intel says, we don't move until I'm certain. Another pause. Marcus, I know, but I need 48 more hours. Can you give me that? Whatever the answer was made Victor's shoulders drop slightly. Good. Keep me updated. Every 6 hours, not 12. And Marcus? If anything changes, if there's even a hint that Volkov knows about this location, you pull the trigger on Protocol 7 immediately. I don't care about the cost. He ended the call and stood motionless, staring out at the water. Isabella approached quietly, her bare feet silent on the stone. When she placed her hand on his back, she felt the coiled tension thrumming through him. What's happened? Victor didn't turn. Volkov made his move. 3 of my warehouses hit simultaneously last night. No casualties on our side, but he took product worth $7 million. Isabella's breath caught. Is that bad? The money's irrelevant. I can replace it in a week. He finally looked at her, and the fury in his eyes made her step back instinctively. What's bad is that he's escalating faster than anticipated. Marcus thinks he's trying to draw me out, force me to come back and defend my territory. Which is exactly what you can't do. No. Victor pulled her into his arms, his embrace almost bruising in its intensity. Because the moment I surface in the city, every eye will be on me, including eyes watching for you. Isabella pressed her face against his chest, breathing in his scent, cedar and smoke and the sea. What did you tell Marcus to do? Wait. Hold the line. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary. His hand stroked through her hair, the gesture at odds with the violence in his voice. I have people in place who can handle Volkov's aggression without me, but it's costing them, costing us. And every hour I stay here is another hour my empire bleeds. The guilt hit Isabella like a physical blow. This is because of me. You're losing ground because you're protecting me. No. Victor gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. This is because Volkov is a greedy bastard who saw an opportunity and took it. You're not responsible for his choices. But I'm the reason you're not there to stop him. You're the reason I have something worth protecting beyond money and power. His kiss was fierce, almost desperate. Don't you dare feel guilty for that. But guilt settled into Isabella's chest anyway, heavy and cold. She'd seen the maps, understood the intricate web of Victor's empire, warehouses and shipping routes, legitimate businesses that laundered dirty money, alliances held together by fear and respect. Every hour he spent on this island teaching her to fight, making love to her, pretending they could have something normal. It was all time his enemies used against him. The rest of the day felt different, sharper, like the bubble of safety they'd built was developing cracks. Victor threw himself into training with renewed intensity, pushing Isabella harder than before. She could see him working through his frustration, channeling helplessness into action. Again, he snapped when she failed to block his strike quickly enough. You're telegraphing. I can see the move before you make it. Isabella reset her stance, breathing hard. They'd been at this for 2 hours, and her arms ached from blocking his attacks. I'm trying. Try harder. Volkov's men won't give you breaks because you're tired. He came at her fast, a combination of strikes that had her backpedaling. What did I teach you about footwork? Stay balanced, maintain center. She dodged left, but he anticipated it, sweeping her legs. Isabella hit the mat hard, the air rushing from her lungs. Victor stood over her, his expression cold. Dead. That's what you are right now. Dead because you hesitated. Anger flared hot in Isabella's chest. She swept his legs the way he'd taught her, using his momentary surprise to reverse their positions. Suddenly she was on top, her forearm pressed against his throat, her whole body pinning his. Not dead, she panted. Fighting back! For a moment they stayed frozen, her above him, his eyes wide with something between shock and pride. Then Victor's hands came up to frame her face, and he pulled her down into a kiss that tasted like sweat and need and desperation. That's my girl, he murmured against her lips. That's exactly right. You never stop fighting. Never surrender.
Even when they think they've won.
Isabella kissed him harder, pouring her fear and determination into it. When they broke apart, both breathing raggedly, she stayed where she was, straddling his hips on the training mat. I won't let you lose everything because of me, she said fiercely. Tell me how to help. Tell me what I can do. You're already doing it. You're staying alive, staying strong. His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones. That's all I need from you, Isabella. It's not enough. Not when your empire is burning while you babysit me on an island. Victor's expression went dangerous. Is that what you think this is? Babysitting? Isn't it? She climbed off him, needing distance. You brought me here to keep me safe while you handle Volkov. That's protection detail, Victor. That's you sacrificing your position to guard a weakness. He was on his feet in one fluid motion, closing the distance between them. You're not a weakness. How many times do I have to say it before you believe me? Until it stops costing you. Isabella's voice cracked. $7 million, 3 warehouses. How much more will you lose before you admit that caring about me is making you vulnerable? I don't care about the money. But you care about the power, the respect, the empire you spent 15 years building. She met his furious gaze steadily. And every day you spend here with me, Volkov chips away at it. Eventually, there won't be anything left to go back to. Victor stared at her for a long moment, his chest heaving. Then he turned and walked away, his hands clenched into fists. Isabella watched him go, her own hands trembling with reaction. She'd pushed him, maybe too hard, but someone had to say it. Someone had to acknowledge the cost of this beautiful, dangerous thing growing between them. She found him an hour later in the villa's study, a room she'd barely entered before. Maps covered the desk, satellite photos of city blocks she didn't recognize. Victor stood with his back to the door, a glass of scotch in his hand, studying the evidence of his empire's geography. I'm sorry, Isabella said quietly. I shouldn't have said those things. You should have. You were right. He didn't turn around. I am losing ground. Every hour I stay here is another advantage I give Volkov. Marcus sent updated numbers 20 minutes ago. We're down 11 million now. 2 more warehouses compromised. One of my lieutenants is talking about switching sides. The defeat in his voice broke something in Isabella's chest. She crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind, pressing her cheek against his spine. Then we go back. We face this together. No. Victor. I said no. He turned in her arms, his face carved from stone. Going back now would be exactly what Volkov wants. He's trying to flush me out, force me to react emotionally instead of strategically. The moment I surface, he'll know he got to me, that I care enough about the Empire to rush back and defend it. So what do? Stay here and watch it crumble? We stick to the plan. We wait. His hands settled on her hips, holding her close. I have good people in place, Isabella. People who've been with me for years. They can hold the line for another week. And if they can't? Victor's smile was sharp, deadly. Then I rebuild. I've done it before, I can do it again. But I won't risk you to save money and territory. Isabella studied his face, seeing the truth beneath the controlled exterior. He meant it. He would actually let his empire burn if it meant keeping her safe. The realization was terrifying and humbling in equal measure. There has to be another way, she said. Some strategy that doesn't require you to choose between protecting me and protecting what you've built. If there is, I haven't found it yet. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. But I'm working on it. Trust me. She did trust him. That was the problem. Isabella trusted Victor completely, believed he would do exactly what he said, sacrifice everything for her safety. But she couldn't let him make that sacrifice. Couldn't be the reason a man who'd clawed his way up from nothing lost everything. That night, lying awake while Victor slept beside her, Isabella stared at the ceiling and tried to find solutions to an impossible equation. How do you protect someone without becoming their weakness? How do you love someone in a world where love was the greatest vulnerability? How do you save a man who'd rather burn his empire than see you hurt? The satellite phone's red light began blinking again at 3 a.m. Victor was awake instantly, rolling out of bed and grabbing the device before it could ring. Isabella listened to his half of the conversation, her stomach knotting with dread. When? A pause. Casualties? Another pause. Longer. I'm on my way. Have the jet ready in 2 hours. He ended the call and stood motionless in the darkness. What happened? Isabella's voice was small in the quiet. Volkov hit one of my clubs. Burned it to the ground. Victor's voice was utterly flat. 3 people dead. Bartender, 2 waitresses. Civilians who had nothing to do with any of this. The grief in those words devastated her. Isabella threw back the covers, crossing to him. I'm so sorry. Their families will be taken care of, financially at least. But it doesn't bring them back. His hands fisted at his sides. This is on me. I should have anticipated this, should have increased security, moved people out. You can't blame yourself for what Volkov did. Can't I? He finally looked at her, and the anguish in his eyes stole her breath. I knew he was escalating. I knew he'd go after soft targets eventually, but I stayed here playing house with you while my people died. The accusation, unintended but cutting nonetheless, landed like a blade. Isabella stepped back as if struck. You're going back. I have to. 3 people are dead, Isabella. I can't hide on this island anymore. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Victor grabbed clothes from the closet, moving with sharp, controlled fury. You're staying here where it's safe. Marcus will increase security. I'll be back in 72 hours once I've handled Volkov. You mean once you've killed him? Yes. No hesitation, no apology. He crossed a line tonight. Civilians are off limits, always. That's the code, and he violated it. So yes, I'm going to kill him. Isabella watched him dress, her mind racing. Let me help. Use me. Victor froze, his shirt half buttoned. What? You said Volkov wants to draw you out. Prove you're vulnerable because of me. So let's give him what he wants. The plan formed even as she spoke, reckless and terrifying. Leak information that I'm in the city. Make him think I'm exposed, unprotected. When he comes for me, you'll be ready. Are you insane? Victor crossed to her in 3 strides, gripping her shoulders. You're suggesting we use you as bait. I'm suggesting we turn your weakness into a weapon. Isabella met his furious gaze steadily. You taught me to fight, Victor. To be aware, to protect myself. Let me prove I'm more than just a liability. No, absolutely not. The risk is exactly what you face every day. She covered his hands with hers. You said I was your partner, that we'd face threats together. Was that a lie? That was before 3 people died. And how many more will die if you go after Volkov the traditional way? How many of your people will get caught in the crossfire? Isabella pressed her advantage, seeing him waver. This way it's controlled. You choose the battlefield, the timing, the terms. You take away his element of surprise. Victor's jaw clenched, every muscle in his body rigid with denial. If something happened to you, if he got his hands on you, he won't, because you'll make sure of it. She cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. I trust you, Victor, completely. Do you trust me? The question hung between them, weighted with everything they'd built over the past week. Trust was the foundation. Without it, they had nothing. With it, they might actually survive. I trust you, Victor said finally, the words dragged out of him. But I hate this plan. I hate everything about it. I know, but it's still the best option we have. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. If we do this, and I mean if, we do it my way.
My rules, my timeline, my people, protecting you every second.
Agreed. And if at any point I think the risk is too high, we abort. No arguments. Agreed. Victor pulled back, his expression carved from stone. We have a lot of planning to do, and very little time to do it. They spent the next 2 hours in the study, Victor on the phone with Marcus, while Isabella listened and learned. The plan took shape slowly, each piece carefully considered. They would return to the city separately, Victor first, making a public appearance to assure his people he was back in control. Isabella would follow 24 hours later, deliberately visible at the penthouse. Word would leak through carefully selected channels that she was alone, that Victor had stashed her there while he dealt with the Volkov situation. He'll send someone to grab her within 48 hours, Marcus said through the speakerphone, his voice tinny but certain. Probably a small team, 3, maybe 4 men. He won't risk a full assault in that building. And we'll be ready, Victor confirmed. I want our best people in place. Dmitri coordinates the detail. No one gets to Isabella, not even close. Understood. But boss, if this goes wrong, it won't. Victor's eyes found Isabella's across the desk. It can't. The helicopter arrived at dawn, sent by Marcus to transport Victor to the mainland. Isabella stood on the landing pad, the wind from the rotors whipping her hair, watching him prepare to leave. He changed into a dark suit, all traces of the man who taught her to fight on the beach buried beneath armor of expensive fabric and colder control. 48 hours, he said, pulling her close despite the waiting pilot. You stay here for 48 hours, then Marcus will bring you back. Not a minute sooner, understand? I understand. Isabella gripped his jacket. Victor, be careful, please. Always am. His kiss was fierce, desperate, a claiming and a promise. You're the one who needs to be careful. Don't take unnecessary risks. Don't try to be a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm just a wife protecting her husband's empire. Something shifted in his expression. Wonder and fear and love so fierce it took her breath away. When this is over, we're going to have a long talk about what you mean to me, about what this is between us. I already know what it is, Isabella said quietly. I've known since the first morning I woke up in your arms. Victor's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her lips. Stay alive, Isabella. That's an order from your husband. Then you stay alive too. That's an order from your wife. He kissed her one more time, then pulled away and climbed into the helicopter. Isabella stepped back as the engine roared to life, the blades spinning faster. Through the window she could see Victor's face, controlled, distant, already shifting into the persona he needed to be. Then the helicopter lifted, and he was gone. Isabella stood alone on the landing pad long after the sound of the rotors faded, staring at the empty sky. The island felt different now, smaller. The villa behind her no longer a sanctuary, but a gilded cage waiting to spring open. 48 hours. 2 days until she walked into danger deliberately, trusting that Victor's planning and Marcus's execution would keep her alive. 2 days to prepare mentally for being bait in a trap designed to catch a monster. Isabella turned and walked back toward the villa, her chin high, her shoulders back. Somewhere along the way from terrified bride to willing partner, she'd found her spine again. Found the strength Victor said he'd seen in her from the beginning. Now she just had to prove she could keep it when Volkov's men came for her. The hours crawled past. Isabella trained alone, practicing the techniques Victor had drilled into her until her muscles screamed. She studied the maps he'd left behind, memorizing the layout of the penthouse, identifying every exit and choke point. She ate mechanically, showered, tried to sleep. The satellite phone remained silent. No updates, no check-ins. The silence was worse than bad news. On the evening of the second day, as the sun painted the sky in shades of fire, the phone finally rang. Isabella grabbed it with shaking hands. Marcus? Mrs. DeLuca, the helicopter will arrive in 1 hour. Are you ready? Was she ready? To walk back into a city where a ruthless criminal wanted to use her against her husband? To deliberately make herself a target? To trust that Victor's people could keep her safe when 3 innocent people had already died? Yes, Isabella said, her voice steady. I'm ready. Good. The pilot has his instructions. Dmitri will meet you at the mainland and escort you to the penthouse. You'll have a full security detail, but they'll remain invisible. To anyone watching, you'll appear alone. I understand. Mrs. DeLuca? Marcus's voice softened slightly. Victor asked me to tell you something. He said to remember what he taught you, about awareness, about fighting back. And he said to tell you he loves you. Isabella's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. Tell him I love him too, and tell him I'll see him soon. I will. Good luck. The call ended. Isabella stood in the study where she and Victor had planned this insane gambit, where he'd kissed her goodbye, where they'd both pretended this was going to work. She touched the maps on his desk, the satellite photos, the evidence of an empire worth fighting for. Then she went upstairs to pack. An hour later, she stood on the landing pad again, this time with a small bag and a heart full of determination. The helicopter descended from the twilight sky, its lights cutting through the gathering darkness. The pilot was different from before, younger, with sharp eyes that assessed her quickly before nodding. "Mrs. DeLuca, I'm taking you to the mainland. Flight time is 30 minutes. Isabella climbed aboard, buckling herself into the seat. As the helicopter lifted, she looked down at the island one last time. The villa glowed in the dusk, white walls turned golden by the setting sun.
It had been her prison and her sanctuary, the place where a contract marriage became something real. Now she was leaving it behind to walk into fire. The flight passed in a blur of gathering darkness and churning thoughts. When they landed at a private airfield, Dmitri was waiting beside a black SUV, a massive man with a scarred face and cold eyes that warmed slightly when he saw her. "Mrs. DeLuca, good to finally meet you. Victor speaks highly of you." "Does he?" Isabella managed a smile as he helped her into the vehicle. "Says you're tougher than you look, that you've got spine." Dmitri slid into the driver's seat, and two other men, both armed, both alert, took positions in the front passenger seat and directly behind Isabella. "Let's hope he's right, because what we're about to do requires serious spine." The drive into the city felt surreal. Isabella watched familiar streets pass by the window, recognizing landmarks from her old life. The cafe where she'd worked seemed like something from another lifetime. That girl who'd worried about making coffee correctly felt like a stranger. The penthouse was exactly as she'd left it, cold, pristine, impersonal. But now Isabella saw it through new eyes. The security cameras hidden in corners, the reinforced windows, the panic room accessible through the master bedroom closet. Victor's world, designed to protect and contain. "We're in position," Dmitri said into his radio. "All entry points covered. She's secure." "For now," Isabella murmured, staring out at the glittering city. Somewhere out there, Volkov was planning his move. Somewhere, Victor was preparing his counterattack. And here she stood, the piece on the board that would determine how this game ended. She touched the platinum ring on her finger, the one Victor had given her in a courthouse, the one that had once meant nothing, and now meant everything. "Come find me," she whispered to the night, to Volkov, to fate itself. "I'm ready." And in the darkness of the city below, unseen watchers noted her presence and began making calls. The trap was set, the bait was in place. Now they just had to wait for the predator to strike. The waiting was worse than any fear Isabella had ever known. 24 hours passed in the penthouse, then 36, each minute stretching into eternity. Dmitri's men were ghosts, present but invisible, their silence more unnerving than conversation would have been. Isabella moved through the space like she was alone, making coffee in the kitchen, reading on the terrace, going through the motions of normalcy while her nerves screamed with tension. The satellite phone Victor had left for her remained dark. No calls, no messages. The silence felt deliberate, designed to keep her isolated and exposed. She understood the strategy. Volkov's watchers needed to believe she was truly alone, but understanding didn't make it easier. On the second night, Isabella stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, her reflection pale against the darkness beyond. Somewhere out there, Victor was moving his pieces into position. Somewhere, Volkov was planning his strike. And here she stood, the visible target, waiting for violence to find her. Her phone buzzed, not the satellite phone, but her personal cell. A text from an unknown number made her pulse spike. "Pretty view from up there. Enjoy it while you can." Isabella's hands trembled as she forwarded the message to Dmitri. His response came seconds later. "Expected. Stay calm. We're ready." But her heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at those words. Someone was watching. Someone knew exactly where she was, what she could see. The invisible threat had just become terrifyingly real. She forced herself to step back from the window, to move through the penthouse as if nothing had changed. In the kitchen, she poured wine with shaking hands, drank it too fast, poured more. The alcohol dulled the sharp edge of fear, but couldn't erase it entirely. Another text arrived as she was climbing into bed. "Sleep well, Mrs. DeLuca. Tomorrow's going to be a big day." Isabella didn't forward this one. She simply turned off the lamp and lay in the darkness, fully dressed beneath the covers, Victor's training running through her mind on an endless loop. Stay aware. Trust your instincts. Fight back. Never surrender. She didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. Just lay there listening to the silence, waiting for it to shatter. The attack came at 4 a.m, that dead hour when the world was at its quietest and security was at its lowest.
Isabella heard the faint scrape of metal on metal, someone bypassing the elevator's security. Her body went rigid, adrenaline flooding her system with crystal clarity. She rolled out of bed, grabbed the gun Dmitri had left in the nightstand, and moved silently to the panic room entrance hidden in the closet. But she didn't go inside. That was what they'd expect. Instead, she pressed herself against the wall beside the bedroom door, the gun heavy in her hands, and waited. Footsteps in the hallway. Multiple sets. Professional, quiet, but not quite silent enough. Isabella's breath came shallow and controlled, her training overriding the terror screaming through her veins. The bedroom door opened slowly. A man entered, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black tactical gear. He moved toward the bed, gun raised, not seeing her in the shadows by the door. Isabella counted heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Then Dimitri's voice shattered the silence like a gunshot. Down! Down! Now! The lights blazed on with blinding intensity. The man at the bed spun toward the door, and Isabella saw his eyes widen as he realized the trap. Dmitri and his team flooded the bedroom from 2 entry points, weapons trained, movements coordinated, and lethal. Hands! Show me your hands! The intruder's gun clattered to the floor. More shouts from the hallway, the rest of Volkov's team being subdued with brutal efficiency. It was over in seconds. 4 men face down on the marble floor, Dimitri's team securing them with plastic restraints and weapons that never wavered. Dmitri crossed to Isabella, his expression grim. You all right? Yes. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. How many? 4. Exactly as we predicted. He glanced at the subdued men. Small team, surgical approach. They came in through the service elevator, bypassed 3 layers of security. Professional work. But not professional enough. Isabella's hands were still shaking, the gun suddenly too heavy to hold. She set it carefully on the dresser. No, not nearly enough. Dmitri pulled out his phone. I'm calling Victor. He needs to know the first part worked. While Dmitri made the call, Isabella studied the captured men. They were young, mid-20s maybe, with the hard eyes and scarred hands of people who'd lived violent lives. Volkov's soldiers. Men who would have taken her, hurt her, used her against Victor without hesitation. One of them, the one who'd entered her bedroom, met her gaze with something that might have been respect. You were waiting for us, he said, his accent thick with Eastern European inflection. The whole thing was a setup. Yes. Isabella kept her voice steady. Did you really think Victor DeLuca would leave his wife unprotected? Volkov said he was weak now. Distracted. That love made him careless. The man's smile was bitter. Guess he was wrong. Very wrong. Dmitri ended his call and moved to stand beside Isabella. Victor wants to talk to you, now. He handed her the satellite phone. Isabella took it with trembling hands, stepping out onto the terrace for privacy. The city sprawled below, lights glittering like scattered diamonds. Somewhere in that vast darkness, her husband was waiting. Isabella! Victor's voice was rough, urgent. Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. Dimitri's team was perfect. It went exactly as we planned. Thank God. The relief in those words was palpable. I'm 10 minutes out. Stay with Dmitri until I get there. Where are you? But even as she asked, Isabella knew. You're coming here? Victor, if Volkov realizes you left your position, he already knows that was the point. Satisfaction edged his voice now, dark and dangerous. While his team was hitting the penthouse, my people were hitting him. 3 of his remaining warehouses, his shipping operation at the port, and his personal compound outside the city. By morning, Alexei Volkov won't have an empire left to defend. The ruthless efficiency of it stole Isabella's breath. While she'd been bait-drawing Volkov's attention, Victor had been a blade cutting through his rival's foundations. How many casualties? On our side? None. His? A pause. He'll wish we'd killed more of them by the time I'm done. Isabella heard the elevator chime inside. Through the glass, she saw Dmitri stiffen, his hand going to his weapon before he recognized whoever had arrived. Then Victor was striding through the penthouse, his suit rumpled and spotted with what might have been blood, his eyes wild until they found her on the terrace. Isabella barely had time to set down the phone before he had her in his arms, crushing her against his chest with bruising force. She felt him shaking, this powerful, controlled man trembling with reaction and relief. Never again, he said fiercely against her hair. Never again, Isabella. I can't do this. Can't use you as bait. Can't put you in danger. I'd rather lose everything than risk you like that again. But it worked. Isabella pulled back enough to see his face. Your plan worked perfectly. I don't care. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't known she was crying. The entire time, all I could think was, what if something went wrong?
What if Dmitri was 1 second too slow? What if they got to you before my people could respond? The thought of losing you, his voice broke. It would destroy me. Completely.
Isabella kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. Love and relief and fierce pride in what they'd accomplished together. When they broke apart, Victor rested his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. "Is Volkov finished?" "Not yet, but he will be soon." Victor's expression went cold, lethal. His men are in custody. His empire is in ruins. By dawn, he'll have nothing left but the choice I'm going to give him.
What choice? Disappear or die? Simple. Final. The voice of a man who'd won and knew it. He has 12 hours to leave the country. After that, there's a price on his head that will make him wish he'd taken the first option. Isabella studied her husband's face. The hard angles, the cold fury, the absolute certainty. This was Victor DeLuca in his element, a predator who defended his territory and was offering mercy only because victory was already assured. Will he take it? The 12 hours? If he's smart. Victor's arm curved around her waist, pulling her close. If he's not, well, I've gotten very good at making examples of people who threaten what's mine. Movement inside made them both turn. Dmitri was supervising the removal of Volkov's captured men, his team efficient and professional. The intruders were being taken somewhere Isabella suspected she didn't want to know about, to face consequences she was better off not imagining. "I should have been here," Victor said suddenly, watching his men work. "Should have been the one protecting you when they came through that door." "You were protecting me, just in a different way." Isabella threaded her fingers through his. "You taught me to protect myself. Then you made sure I wouldn't have to do it alone. That's what a partnership is, Victor. Trust, shared risk, both of us fighting for what we've built." He pulled her back inside, away from the terrace and the evidence of violence. In the bedroom, he checked her over with careful hands, searching for injuries despite her assurances she was fine. Only when he was satisfied did some of the tension leave his shoulders. "I need to finish this," he said, his voice rough. "Need to make sure Volkov understands the consequences of coming after my wife." "But Isabella," he cupped her face, his eyes fierce. "When this is over, when everything is settled, we're going to talk, really talk, about what this marriage is, about what I want it to be." "I already know what I want it to be," Isabella said softly. "Real, true. A partnership built on more than just contracts and protection. It's already more than that. Has been since the island, maybe since before." His kiss was gentle this time, reverent. "I love you. I should have said it sooner, should have found the courage weeks ago. But I'm saying it now. I love you, Isabella. Completely." The words settled into her chest like coming home. "I love you too. Even when you're being overprotective and controlling and refusing to let me help." Victor's laugh was startled, genuine. "You helped tonight. Proved you're braver than I gave you credit for." His expression sobered. "But you also proved how much I have to lose. That's going to make me careful, Isabella. Probably more careful than you'll like." "I can live with careful, as long as you don't try to lock me away like I'm made of glass." "Deal." He kissed her forehead, then stepped back. "I need to go. Marcus is waiting with the final numbers, and I need to make sure Volkov gets my message about the deadline." "Will you come back? After?" "Try to keep me away." His smile was crooked, warm. "This is our home now, Isabella. Both of us. No more separate rooms, no more distance. When I come back, I'm staying." Isabella watched him leave, Dmitri and his team following like shadows. The penthouse felt too large in their absence, too quiet. She cleaned up the bedroom, erasing evidence of the attack, trying to process everything that had happened. Dawn was breaking when her phone rang. Not the satellite phone, but her personal cell. The same unknown number from the threatening text. Isabella's hand hovered over the answer button, heart racing. Then she swiped to accept. "Hello? Mrs. DeLuca." The voice was cultured, Russian-accented, cold as winter. "Alexei Volkov. I believe we have something to discuss." Every muscle in Isabella's body went rigid. "I have nothing to say to you." "Oh, I think you do. You see, your husband believes he's won, believes he's destroyed my operation and forced me into a corner, but he's made one critical error." "What error?" Isabella kept her voice steady despite the ice flooding her veins. "He assumed his wife would stay safely in her tower while he played war. He assumed wrong." Volkov's laugh was soft, dangerous. "You're looking at the sunrise, aren't you? Beautiful view from the penthouse terrace. Such a shame you won't get to enjoy it much longer." Isabella's blood ran cold. She spun toward the windows, searching the buildings across the street for threats she couldn't see. "You're bluffing. Your men are in custody. Your empire is finished." "My empire, perhaps.
but not my reach, not my resources, and certainly not my desire for revenge. A pause, heavy with menace. Your husband took everything from me, Mrs. DeLuca. My businesses, my reputation, my future. It's only fair I take something from him. If you touch me, Victor will hunt you to the ends of the earth. Oh, I'm counting on it. You see, killing you would be too quick, too merciful. But taking you? Making him watch as I dismantle everything he loves while he's powerless to stop it? That's a revenge worth having. The line went dead. Isabella stood frozen, the phone trembling in her hand. Then she was moving, grabbing her bag, the gun from the nightstand, her mind racing through options. Volkov was coming. Not his soldiers, not his hired men. Him. Personally. And if he was making calls from unknown numbers threatening her directly, he was already close. Too close. She hit the panic button Dmitri had shown her, the one that would bring his team running and alert Victor simultaneously. Then she moved to the panic room, this time fully intending to use it. But the closet door wouldn't open. Isabella pulled harder, then saw the problem. Someone had jammed the mechanism from the inside. They were already here. Isabella spun, raising the gun just as the bedroom door burst open. Not Volkov's men this time. These were different. Professional mercenaries in tactical gear, moving with military precision. She fired twice, the shots deafening in the confined space, before someone tackled her from behind. The gun flew from her hands. Isabella fought like Victor had taught her, using knees and elbows, targeting vulnerable spots. She felt cartilage crunch under her elbow, heard someone curse in Russian. But there were too many of them, and they were prepared for resistance. A needle bit into her neck. Cold flooded her veins, the world tilting sideways. Isabella's last coherent thought was that she'd failed. Failed to protect herself. Failed to stay safe for Victor. Failed to be the partner she'd promised to be. Then darkness swallowed everything. She woke to the smell of salt water and engine fuel. Isabella's head pounded, her mouth dry as sand. When she tried to move, she discovered her wrists were zip-tied to a metal rail. She was on a boat, a yacht, based on the expensive fixtures around her. Through the porthole, she could see they were moving fast across open water. Awake finally. Good. Alexei Volkov stepped into her line of sight, and Isabella got her first look at Victor's enemy. He was older than she'd expected, maybe 50, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of face that would have been handsome without the cruelty in his eyes. I was beginning to worry we'd used too much sedative. Where are we? Isabella's voice came out hoarse, rusty. Heading to international waters. Far from your husband's reach, far from anyone who might interfere. Volkov crouched in front of her, studying her face with clinical interest. I must admit, I'm curious what Victor sees in you. You're pretty enough, but hardly worth destroying an empire over. Let me go. If you think Victor will negotiate, oh, I know he'll negotiate. That's the entire point. Volkov's smile was sharp. Right now, he's receiving proof that I have you. Photos, video, your wedding ring. He gestured to her bare left hand. By tonight, he'll be desperate, willing to give me anything I want to get you back. Isabella's mind raced, trying to remember her training through the fog of drugs and fear. She was restrained but mobile. The boat was moving but not impossibly fast. There had to be a way out, some advantage she could exploit. He'll kill you for this, she said, buying time. Perhaps, if he finds us. Volkov stood, adjusting his cufflinks with casual elegance. But the Mediterranean is a very large sea, Mrs. DeLuca, and I have friends in places your husband has never thought to look. He left her alone in what appeared to be a luxury cabin. Isabella tested the restraints, but they were tight, professional. The zip ties cut into her wrists when she pulled. She forced herself to breathe, to think. What would Victor do? What had he taught her about impossible situations? Never surrender. Find the weakness. Exploit it ruthlessly. The cabin door opened again, and a different man entered, younger, nervous, carrying a bottle of water. Not one of the mercenaries from the penthouse. Crew, maybe. Or one of Volkov's less committed soldiers. You need to drink, he said, his accent softer than Volkov's. Boss says to keep you healthy. Healthy for what? But Isabella opened her mouth when he held the bottle to her lips, drinking greedily. The water was cool, clean, untainted, small mercy. For the exchange, your husband will pay good money to get you back. The young man hesitated, then added quietly, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. This isn't right, taking a woman. But Volkov pays well. And in my country, you don't say no to men like him. What's your name? Isabella kept her voice gentle, non-threatening. Mikhail. He glanced toward the door nervously. I shouldn't talk to you. Then don't talk. Just listen. Isabella met his eyes. My husband will find us. When he does, everyone on this boat will die. Everyone except the person who helped me. That person might survive, might even get paid for their assistance. Mikhail's expression flickered, fear and calculation warring across his young face. You're lying. Volkov says DeLuca is weak now, that love made him soft. Love made him dangerous. Isabella let steel enter her voice. Because now he has something to protect, something to fight for. And Victor DeLuca will burn the world down before he lets anyone hurt what's his. The young man backed toward the door, shaking his head, but she'd seen the doubt in his eyes, the fear. Seeds planted. Maybe they'd grow. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, visible through the porthole. Isabella's wrists ached from the restraints, her body stiff from sitting in the same position. She drifted in and out of focus, fighting the residual effects of whatever they drugged her with. The yacht's engines changed pitch. They were slowing. Isabella straightened, her pulse quickening. Through the porthole, she could see another vessel approaching, smaller, faster. A cigarette boat cutting through the waves like a knife. Volkov appeared in the doorway, his expression satisfied. Your husband is a predictable man, Mrs. DeLuca. He sent his terms for your return. Marcus himself on that little boat, ready to negotiate. Victor wouldn't send Marcus alone. Isabella's voice was stronger now, the fog clearing from her mind. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap. They all are. Volkov's smile was indulgent. But I have you and he wants you back. That gives me all the leverage I need. He hauled her to her feet, cutting the zip ties from the rail, but leaving her wrists bound. Isabella stumbled, her legs numb from sitting so long, and Volkov steadied her with a grip that was almost gentle. Come. Let's give your husband his first glimpse of what he's lost. He dragged her up to the deck, the Mediterranean sun blinding after the dim cabin. Isabella blinked, trying to adjust, and saw the cigarette boat idling 50 yards away. A lone figure stood at the helm, tall, broad-shouldered, familiar. Marcus. But as Isabella's vision cleared, she saw what Volkov apparently didn't. The water around the cigarette boat was wrong. Too dark, too disturbed. And in the distance, barely visible against the glare, other boats were moving into position. Victor hadn't sent Marcus alone. He'd sent an army. Show him, Volkov ordered one of his men. The mercenary raised a phone, taking photos of Isabella on the deck, her bound wrists, her disheveled appearance. Proof of life and captivity in equal measure. Isabella met Marcus's gaze across the water and mouthed 2 words. Not alone. Marcus's expression didn't change, but she saw the acknowledgement in his slight nod. He knew. They all knew. This was the endgame. Volkov's phone rang. He answered it, that cold smile still in place. DeLuca, so good of you to respond to my invitation. Isabella couldn't hear Victor's response, but she saw Volkov's expression harden. Those are not the terms I stated. You don't dictate... He stopped, listening. That's impossible. You're bluffing. He never bluffs. Isabella's voice cut through the tension. Whatever he told you, it's true. You've already lost, Volkov. You just don't know it yet. Volkov backhanded her across the face. The blow sent Isabella stumbling, copper flooding her mouth. But she smiled through the blood, watching realization dawn in her captor's eyes as he finally saw what she'd seen. The other boats weren't just approaching. They were surrounding them. Fast military-grade vessels cutting off every escape route. And on the nearest one, standing at the bow like an avenging angel, was Victor. You have 10 seconds to release my wife, Victor's voice boomed across the water, amplified by speakers. After that, I sink your yacht and pick her out of the water myself. Volkov's hand tightened on Isabella's arm, pulling her against him as a shield. If you fire on this boat, she dies with me. Then we both know you're dead either way. Victor's voice was ice and fury. The only question is whether you take her with you. And if you do, Volkov, if you hurt her any more than you already have, what I do to you will make you beg for the mercy of drowning. The yacht's crew was already moving, Isabella realized, abandoning posts, raising hands, recognizing the impossible odds. Only Volkov and his core mercenaries remained committed, weapons raised against a force that vastly outnumbered them. Last chance, Victor called. Release her, surrender. You get to live. Maybe even get to leave the country like I originally offered. But if one more second passes with your hands on my wife, that offer expires and you become a corpse. Volkov's grip loosened fractionally. Isabella felt it, felt him calculating odds and recognizing there was no winning move. Then his hand dropped away completely, and he shoved her toward the yacht's edge. Take her. She's worth more trouble than she's worth anyway. Isabella didn't wait for permission. She climbed onto the rail and dove, her bound hands making the entry awkward but functional. The Mediterranean was shockingly cold, stealing her breath. She kicked hard for the surface, broke through gasping, and saw the cigarette boat racing toward her. Marcus hauled her aboard with efficient strength, cutting her wrist restraints with a knife. You all right? Better now. Isabella's teeth chattered as he wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Victor? Right behind us. The larger vessel pulled alongside, and suddenly Victor was there, climbing down to the cigarette boat with complete disregard for safety or protocol. He pulled Isabella into his arms so hard it hurt, his whole body shaking with reaction. I've got you. I've got you. You're safe now. I'm okay. I'm fine. Isabella buried her face in his neck, breathing in his scent, cedar and smoke and home. I knew you'd come. Always. His voice broke on the word. Always, Isabella. No matter what. No matter where. Behind them, Volkov's yacht was being boarded by Victor's men, the surrender complete. The Russian crime lord stood on the deck, hands raised, his empire and his freedom both forfeited in the space of hours. What happens to him now? Isabella asked quietly. He gets a cell, a trial, prison for the rest of his miserable life. Victor's arms tightened around her. I promised you he wouldn't touch you. I failed. That failure gets paid for in years, not bullets. You didn't fail. You saved me. Barely. The anguish in his voice cut deep. If Marcus had been 5 minutes slower, if we hadn't tracked the yacht when we did, if... Isabella kissed him, silencing the litany of terrible possibilities. But you did. You found me. You saved me. That's what matters. Victor rested his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. Around them, his people secured the scene with professional efficiency. But in this moment, there was only the two of them, husband and wife, survivor and savior, two people who'd fought their way through fire to find each other. Take us home, Victor said to Marcus, not releasing Isabella. This is finished. The ride back to shore was quiet. Isabella wrapped in Victor's arms, both of them processing everything that had happened. By the time they reached the marina, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. Victor carried her to a waiting car despite her protests that she could walk. In the back seat, he held her close, his hand stroking through her salt-tangled hair. I'm taking you to the safe house, he said quietly. Somewhere Volkov's remaining people can't find you. Somewhere I can keep you protected until every last threat is neutralized. For how long? As long as it takes. His eyes met hers, fierce and determined. I won't risk you again, Isabella. Won't let anyone get that close. If that means we disappear for months, years, then that's what we do. Isabella touched his face, feeling the stubble rough against her palm. Or we could find another way. A better way. One that doesn't involve hiding. There is no better way. Not when people want to hurt you to get to me. Then we make them understand that hurting me means facing us both, together, as partners. She held his gaze steadily. I'm not a weakness, Victor. I'm your strength. Your reason to fight smarter, harder, better. But only if you let me stand beside you instead of locking me away. The war played out across his expression, fear and love and desperate need to protect battling against recognition of truth. Finally, he pulled her close, his voice rough. You're going to give me gray hair before I'm 40. Probably, but you'll look distinguished. Isabella managed a shaky smile. Take me home, Victor, our real home, the penthouse, where we belong. That's not safe yet. Nowhere is completely safe, but anywhere with you is home. The word settled something in him, she could see it. The tension easing, the desperate fear giving way to grim determination. Victor pressed a kiss to her temple. Home it is, but with double security, full detail, and you don't leave my sight for the next month. I can live with that. The drive back to the city felt like crossing into another world. By the time they reached the penthouse, full night had fallen, the city lights glittering like promises. Dmitri met them in the private garage, his expression grim. The situation is contained. Volkov's in custody, his remaining assets seized. His people are either in custody or fled the country. He looked at Isabella, something like respect in his eyes. Heard you gave them hell before the extraction. Planted doubt in one of the crew. Kids talking now gave us intel on Volkov's remaining contacts. Mikhail. Isabella remembered the nervous young man. Will he be okay? He'll testify. Get immunity and relocation. Dmitri's smile was small. You were right to try turning him. Saved lives, including your own. Victor's arm curved around her waist, proud and possessive. My wife is full of surprises. They rode the elevator up in silence, exhaustion finally catching up with Isabella. In the penthouse, everything looked exactly as she'd left it. Evidence of the earlier attack cleaned away, no trace remaining of violence or fear. Shower, Victor ordered gently. Then food. Then sleep. in that order. Isabella didn't argue. In the master bathroom, she stood under scalding water until her skin turned pink, washing away salt and fear and the residual terror of captivity. When she emerged wrapped in a towel, she found Victor had laid out soft clothes and was heating soup in the kitchen. They ate in comfortable silence, too tired for conversation. Then Victor led her to bed, his bed, their bed now, and pulled her into his arms. Isabella melted against him, finally safe, finally home. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you." Victor's arms tightened. "And I swear to you, Isabella, nothing like today will ever happen again. I'll make sure of it. We'll make sure of it, together." His kiss was answer and promise both. And as Isabella drifted toward sleep, wrapped in the arms of the man who'd moved heaven and earth to save her, she knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. Partners. Equals. Unbreakable. The way it was always meant to be. Isabella woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of Victor's voice in the next room, low and controlled but edged with steel. She lay still for a moment, letting the previous day's events settle into memory rather than nightmare. The kidnapping, the yacht, Victor's face when he'd pulled her from the water. All of it real, all of it survived. She found him in his study, dressed in charcoal slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, papers spread across the desk. Marcus stood on the other side, tablet in hand, both men looking grim. "I don't care what it costs," Victor was saying. "I want every single person who helped Volkov identified and dealt with. The crew who sailed that yacht, the mercenaries who broke into my home, anyone who knew about the plan and didn't stop it. All of them. Already in motion. Dimitri's team has 32 names so far." Marcus glanced up as Isabella appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. DeLuca, you should be resting." "I've rested enough." Isabella moved to Victor's side, and his arm immediately curved around her waist, pulling her close. "What are you planning?" "Justice." Victor's voice was flat. "For what they did to you, what they tried to do. Volkov's in custody. His empire is destroyed. Isn't that enough?" "No." The single word was absolute. "He put his hands on you, drugged you, took you from our home. That doesn't get answered with a prison cell and asset seizure. That gets answered with what?" Isabella turned to face him fully. "With blood? With bodies? With you becoming exactly the kind of monster everyone already thinks you are?" Victor's jaw tightened. "I'm protecting what's mine. I'm not a possession to be avenged. I'm your wife, your partner." She softened her voice, touching his face. "And I'm telling you that what I need isn't revenge. It's peace. Real peace. The kind where we don't spend every day looking over our shoulders waiting for the next threat. That's not how my world works, Isabella. You know that. Then maybe it's time to build a different world." She looked between Victor and Marcus. "You've spent 15 years creating an empire through fear and violence. What if you spent the next 15 building something else? Something legitimate. Something that doesn't put targets on our backs." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Boss, she might have a point. The legitimate businesses are already out-earning the illegal operations by 40%. We could transition entirely within 2 years if we moved aggressively." Victor stared at Isabella like she'd suggested flying to the moon. "You're asking me to walk away from everything I've built. I'm asking you to evolve what you've built into something better, something sustainable." Isabella's hands gripped his shirt. "Yesterday proved we can't keep living like this. Every enemy you make is a threat to both of us now. Every deal that goes wrong, every territory dispute, every ambitious rival, they all know the fastest way to hurt you is through me. Which is why I need to make examples. Show everyone what happens when they what? Try to use your love against you?" Isabella's voice rose. "You can't kill every person who sees me as your weakness, Victor. There will always be another Volkov, another threat. Unless you remove the incentive entirely by stepping away from the criminal empire and into legitimate business." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Marcus looked between them, clearly torn between loyalty to his boss and recognition that Isabella might be right. Victor's expression was unreadable, but Isabella could see the war playing out behind his eyes. "You make it sound simple," he said finally. "Just walk away from 15 years of blood and territory and power." "It won't be simple. It'll be hard and complicated and probably dangerous in its own way. But Victor..." She pressed her hand over his heart. "I didn't fall in love with a crime lord. I fell in love with a man who noticed a struggling waitress and saw her worth, who protected his people, who built something from nothing through intelligence and determination. That man doesn't need illegal empires to be powerful." Victor pulled her close, his face buried in her hair. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "You're asking me to trust that going legitimate won't make me weak,
that giving up the criminal operations won't leave us vulnerable. I'm asking you to trust that we're stronger together building something new than we'll ever be defending something old. Isabella pulled back to meet his eyes.
And I'm asking you to choose a future where our children won't grow up with bodyguards and panic rooms and the constant threat of being used against you. The word children hung in the air between them. Victor's expression shifted, surprise, then something tender and fierce that made Isabella's breath catch. Children, he repeated softly. You've thought about that? About having a family with me? Yes. No hesitation. But not in this world. Not where every enemy you have will see them as leverage. I want children who can play in parks without armed escorts, who can go to school without worrying about kidnapping attempts, who can grow up knowing their father built an empire on innovation and business acumen, not fear and violence. Victor's hands framed her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. You'd give me that? A real family? A real life? We'd give each other that, together. Isabella smiled through the tears gathering in her eyes. But only if you're willing to make the hard choices now that will make that future possible. Marcus cleared his throat. I'll give you two some privacy. But boss, for what it's worth, she's right. The writing's been on the wall for years. Law enforcement is getting smarter, forensic accounting is getting better, and the profit margins on legitimate operations are outpacing the illegal ones. We could make this transition. It wouldn't even be that difficult. After Marcus left, Victor stood motionless for a long moment, still holding Isabella. Then he moved to the windows overlooking the city, his empire spread out below like a glittering map. My father was nothing, he said quietly. A day laborer who drank himself to death when I was 10. My mother cleaned houses for rich people who treated her like furniture. I swore I'd never be powerless like they were, never be at someone else's mercy. Isabella came to stand beside him. You're not powerless. You never were. You built an empire from nothing, Victor, that took vision and courage and incredible strength. Those qualities don't disappear just because you redirect them toward legitimate business. The people who work for me, Marcus, Dimitri, the others, they chose this life, chose the danger and the violence because it paid better than legal work. What happens to them if I go legitimate? You think they wouldn't follow you? Isabella's hand found his. Marcus practically wrote a business plan for the transition just now. Your people are loyal to you, not the criminal empire. They'll follow where you lead. Victor was quiet for so long, Isabella thought she'd pushed too hard, asked too much. Then he turned to her, his expression raw and vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. If I do this, if I really walk away from the criminal operations and go fully legitimate, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise you won't regret it. Won't look at me 5 years from now and wish you'd married someone different. Someone who didn't have blood on his hands and bodies in his past. His voice cracked. Because I can change what I build, Isabella, but I can't change what I've done. Can't erase the man I was. Isabella stepped into his arms, holding him as tightly as he'd held her countless times. I don't want to erase who you were. That man survived impossible odds and built himself into something extraordinary. I just want to help him become who he's meant to be next. And Victor? She pulled back to meet his eyes. I could never regret choosing you. Never. His kiss was desperate, grateful, full of promises neither of them could quite articulate. When they broke apart, Victor rested his forehead against hers, breathing hard. All right, we do this your way. We transition to legitimate operations, phase out the criminal enterprise, build something our children won't have to pay for with their safety. His hands tightened on her waist. But we do it smart, carefully. No rushing, no leaving ourselves vulnerable during the transition. How long? 2 years. Maybe 3. Enough time to shift operations, buy out competitors legitimately, establish ourselves as a real corporate entity. He smiled, and for the first time since the kidnapping, it reached his eyes. Think you can handle being a corporate wife instead of a crime lord's? I think I can handle being your wife, whatever that means. Isabella's smile matched his. Besides, I've always wanted to learn about business. Real business, not the kind that involves warehouses full of questionable merchandise. Victor's laugh was surprised, genuine. You want to work? In the company? Why not? I'm smart, I'm motivated, and I'm already invested in the success of your empire. Might as well make it official. She raised an eyebrow. Unless you think I can't handle it? I think you can handle anything you set your mind to. You've proven that repeatedly. His expression turned serious. But Isabella, running a corporate empire is different from surviving criminal threats. It's board meetings and hostile takeovers and financial regulations. You'd really want that? I want to build something with you. Whether that's corporate empires or family foundations or both. Isabella threaded her fingers through his. I spent my whole life being invisible, Victor. You made me visible. Now I want to use that visibility to create something meaningful. The pride in his expression made her chest warm. Then we build it together. All of it. The legitimate business empire, the family, the future we both want. The next weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Victor called meetings with his key people, laying out the transition plan with the same strategic precision he'd used to build his criminal empire. There was resistance initially, old-timers who didn't trust legitimate business, who worried going legal would make them soft. But Victor's vision was compelling, backed by Marcus's detailed financial projections showing exactly how much more profitable they could be without the overhead of bribes, enforcement, and constant legal threats. Isabella threw herself into learning everything she could about the legitimate operations. She sat in on board meetings, studied financial reports, asked questions that sometimes made the old guard uncomfortable, but always led to better understanding. Slowly, the men who'd seen her as Victor's weakness began seeing her as his partner. Intelligent, strategic, unafraid to challenge assumptions. Volkov's trial became national news, the prosecution building a case that exposed decades of criminal activity. Victor testified, his immunity negotiated in exchange for information that brought down 3 other criminal organizations. It was risky, making himself so visible, but Isabella understood the strategy. By cooperating with law enforcement on this case, Victor was building bridges that would protect their transition to legitimacy. The day Volkov was sentenced to life without parole, Isabella and Victor stood outside the courthouse facing a wall of cameras and reporters. Victor's statement was brief and carefully crafted. Justice has been served today. Alexei Volkov threatened my wife, my family, and countless innocent people in pursuit of power and revenge. I'm grateful to law enforcement for their thorough investigation and prosecution. My company and I will continue to cooperate fully with authorities to ensure criminals like Volkov can never threaten our city again. No mention of his own criminal past. No acknowledgement of the empire he was systematically dismantling. Just the image of a businessman who'd helped bring a dangerous man to justice. Isabella watched the news coverage that night, seeing how the media portrayed Victor, not as a crime lord, but as a victim of criminal enterprise who'd fought back. The narrative was shifting exactly as they'd planned. It's working, she said, curled against him on the couch. They're starting to see you differently. Thanks to you. Victor's fingers combed through her hair. You were right about all of it. The transition, the cooperation with law enforcement, the shift in public perception. I would never have seen this path without you. You would have found it eventually. You're too smart not to. Isabella turned to look at him. But I'm glad we're finding it together. 6 months after the kidnapping, Victor announced the formation of DeLuca Holdings, a legitimate corporate entity that would oversee his shipping companies, real estate developments, and technology investments. The announcement was carefully timed to coincide with a major charitable initiative, the DeLuca Foundation, which would fund education and job training programs in the same neighborhoods where Victor had once run criminal operations. We're giving back, Isabella explained to the foundation's board during their first meeting. Investing in communities that deserve better opportunities. Creating legitimate pathways to success for people who might otherwise turn to crime out of desperation. One of the board members, a retired judge who'd initially been skeptical of the entire enterprise, nodded approvingly. Mrs. DeLuca, I have to admit, when you and your husband first approached me about this foundation, I had serious doubts. But what you're building here is genuinely impressive, meaningful. Thank you. But the credit belongs to the people we're helping. We're just providing resources. Isabella smiled. My husband and I both know what it's like to feel powerless, to feel like the system is stacked against you. If we can use our resources to change that for even a few people, it's worth every dollar invested. The foundation grew rapidly, fueled by Victor's considerable wealth and Isabella's genuine passion for the work. She spent hours visiting the programs they funded, talking to students and job trainees, listening to their stories. It reminded her of who she'd been, invisible, struggling, desperate for a chance. Now she could give other people that chance. A year after Volkov's sentencing, Isabella stood in the bathroom of their penthouse staring at a positive pregnancy test, her hands shaking with joy and terror in equal measure. They'd talked about children, planned for them in the abstract future. But now that future was suddenly tangibly real. She found Victor in his study, reviewing acquisition documents for a shipping company they were buying legitimately through proper channels and legal negotiations. He looked up when she entered, his expression shifting from concentration to concern. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Isabella crossed to him, the pregnancy test clutched in her hand. Everything's right. Perfectly, terrifyingly right. She handed him the test. Victor stared at it for a long moment, his expression frozen. Then he looked up at her, and the wonder in his eyes stole her breath. You're pregnant? We're having a baby? Yes, Isabella's voice cracked. Are you happy?
I know we planned to wait another year until the transition was complete, but Victor pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet, spinning her around with uncharacteristic abandon. Happy? Isabella, I can't even... He set her down carefully, his hands immediately moving to her still flat stomach. There's a person in there, our person. Part you, part me, completely ours. I'm scared, Isabella admitted. What if we can't protect them? What if someone from your past comes after our family? Then we deal with it, together. Victor's hands framed her face. But Isabella, look at what we've built in the past year. The legitimate empire, the foundation, the relationships with law enforcement and community leaders. We're not the same people we were when Volkov took you. We're stronger now, safer, better positioned to protect our family. Promise me something, Isabella's hands covered his. Promise that our child will never have to pay for your past. That we'll give them a normal life, as normal as possible given who we are. I promise. Everything I'm building now, everything we're creating together, it's all for them, for the family we're making. His kiss was gentle, reverent. I love you. I love this baby we made. And I swear I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you both have everything you need. The pregnancy brought changes Isabella hadn't anticipated. Victor became simultaneously more protective and more determined to accelerate the transition to legitimate business. Criminal operations were shut down faster than originally planned, assets liquidated or converted to legal enterprises. Some of the old guard left, unwilling to adapt to the new reality. But most stayed, recognizing that Victor's vision offered long-term stability they'd never had in the criminal world. Marcus became the Foundation's chief operating officer, applying his strategic mind to charitable work with the same efficiency he'd once applied to criminal enterprises. Dmitri shifted to heading corporate security, his skills still valuable but now used to protect legitimate interests rather than illegal operations. Isabella's belly grew, and with it, the reality of the life they were building. She attended prenatal appointments with Victor beside her, both of them staring in awe at ultrasound images of their daughter. A girl, the technician had confirmed at 20 weeks, perfect and healthy. A daughter, Victor kept saying, wonder and terror mixing in his voice. We're having a daughter, Isabella. Are you disappointed? I know some men want sons. Disappointed? He looked at her like she'd lost her mind. I'm terrified. How am I supposed to protect a daughter in this world? How do I keep her safe from everything I know is out there? The same way we keep each other safe, with love and intelligence and the empire we're building together. Isabella took his hand, pressing it against her stomach where their daughter was kicking. Feel that? She's already strong, already fighting. She's going to be fine, Victor. Better than fine. 2 years after their courthouse wedding, Victor called a press conference to announce the complete dissolution of what remained of his criminal operations and the full transition of DeLuca Holdings into legitimate corporate status. Isabella stood beside him, 7 months pregnant, as he fielded questions from reporters who still couldn't quite believe the transformation. Mr. DeLuca, critics say you're trying to whitewash a criminal past, that going legitimate doesn't erase the violence you've committed. How do you respond? Victor's hand found Isabella's, squeezing gently before he answered. They're right. I can't erase my past or the things I've done. I can only acknowledge them, learn from them, and work to build something better going forward. That's what DeLuca Holdings represents. A commitment to creating legitimate value, supporting communities, and providing opportunities that don't require people to compromise their integrity. And the rumors that you cooperated with federal investigations into your former associates? I've cooperated fully with law enforcement on multiple cases, yes, because I believe in justice and accountability, including my own accountability. Victor's voice was steady, unflinching. I'm not asking anyone to forget who I was. I'm asking them to judge me on who I'm becoming. The questions continued, some hostile, some genuinely curious. Through it all, Isabella stood beside her husband, a visible reminder of what he was fighting for. When a reporter asked about her role in the transformation, she answered with quiet confidence. I'm Victor's partner, in business, in life, in everything we're building. That means supporting his vision for legitimate enterprise and ensuring the foundation serves the communities that need it most. It also means being honest about the challenges of transitioning away from criminal operations. It's not easy, and it's not quick, but it's necessary, and it's worth it. Their daughter was born on a warm spring evening, 3 weeks before her due date, but perfectly healthy. Victor was there for every moment, holding Isabella's hand through contractions, cutting the umbilical cord with shaking hands, cradling their daughter with a tenderness that made the nurses smile. She's perfect, he whispered, staring at the tiny face with complete adoration. Absolutely perfect. What should we name her? Isabella touched their daughter's small hand, watching her tiny fingers curl reflexively. Sophia. It means wisdom and hope. Sophia DeLuca. Victor tested the name, smiled. It's perfect. She's perfect. You're perfect. He leaned down to kiss Isabella's forehead. Thank you, for her, for everything, for saving me. We saved each other, Isabella corrected softly. That's what partners do. Sophia grew quickly, filling their penthouse with noise and joy and a kind of chaos Isabella had never imagined wanting. Victor was a devoted father, rearranging his schedule to be present for feedings and diaper changes and the 1,000 small moments that made up their daughter's early days. The empire continued to grow, but differently now. DeLuca Holdings acquired companies through legitimate means, built value through innovation and strategic partnerships rather than intimidation and violence. The foundation expanded its programs, creating real opportunities in communities that had been neglected for decades. 3 years after their wedding, Isabella stood in the conference room of DeLuca Holdings' new headquarters, presenting the foundation's annual report to the board. She was pregnant again, a son this time. And Sophia sat in the corner with Marcus, who'd somehow become the world's most unlikely babysitter. Our job training programs have placed 847 people in legitimate employment this year, Isabella reported, clicking through slides that showed real faces, real success stories. Our scholarship fund has sent 156 students to college. Our small business incubator has helped launch 43 new enterprises. These aren't just statistics. Their lives changed, futures built, exactly what we set out to accomplish. The board approved increased funding unanimously. After the meeting, Victor pulled Isabella into his office, his hands gentle on her growing belly. You're incredible. You know that? I'm doing what needs to be done, same as you. Isabella smiled up at him. We make a good team, Mr. DeLuca. The best team. His kiss was soft, sweet. I love you. I love our family. I love the life we've built together. Even though it's completely different from what you planned when you married me? Especially because of that. Victor's hand cupped her cheek. You gave me something I didn't even know I wanted. A real partnership, a family. A purpose beyond power and territory. You gave me everything, Isabella. Their son was born in early winter, perfect and healthy like his sister. They named him Marco, after Victor's grandfather who'd emigrated with nothing and built a life through honest labor. It felt right, honoring the legitimate path they'd chosen. The years passed in a blur of board meetings and foundation galas, diaper changes and first steps, building an empire that their children could inherit without shame. Victor's past never fully disappeared. There were always whispers, always people who remembered who he'd been. But slowly, gradually, the present and future overwhelmed the past. Sophia started kindergarten at a school where other children's parents were lawyers and doctors and business executives. No one looked at her and saw a crime lord's daughter. They saw a bright, energetic girl whose parents ran successful companies and funded scholarships. Marco learned to walk, then run, then climb everything in sight. He had Victor's determination and Isabella's kindness, a combination that would serve him well. 5 years after their courthouse wedding, Isabella and Victor stood on the terrace of their penthouse, the same place where they'd first begun to really see each other, where walls had started to come down. Sophia was at a play date, Marco napping under the watchful eye of their nanny. For once, they were alone. Do you ever regret it? Isabella asked quietly. Walking away from the criminal empire? The power you had? Victor pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her from behind, his hands resting on her waist. Not once. Not ever. That power was hollow, Isabella, built on fear and violence and the constant threat of losing everything. He gestured to the city below, to the headquarters building that bore his name, to the penthouse where their children slept. This is real, solid. Something I built that they can inherit without paying for my sins. We built, Isabella corrected. Everything we have, we built together. Yes, we did. He turned her to face him, his expression serious. I need you to understand something. When I married you, it was to settle a debt and protect you from worse predators. I told myself it was business, nothing more. But even then, some part of me knew you were going to change everything. I didn't change you, Victor. I just gave you space to become who you already were underneath all the armor. Maybe. But you saved me either way. From a life of empty power and constant war. From becoming someone even I couldn't recognize in the mirror. His hands framed her face with infinite tenderness. You gave me love, family, purpose, everything that matters. Isabella kissed him, pouring 5 years of partnership and growth and fierce love into it. When they broke apart, both smiling, she touched the platinum ring on her finger, the one he'd given her in that courthouse, the one that had once meant nothing and now meant everything. Do you remember what you said to me on the island, that you'd burn the world down to keep me safe? I remember. I meant it. I know you did. But Victor, she held his gaze steadily. You did something better. You built a new world instead, one where our children can grow up safe and loved, where your name means innovation and philanthropy instead of fear, where we're partners building something that matters. We're not done building yet. Victor's smile was warm, genuine, the smile of a man who'd found peace. There's still so much to do, companies to grow, programs to expand, children to raise. Then we'd better get to work. Isabella's smile matched his, together, the way we do everything now. Inside the penthouse, Marco woke from his nap and began calling for his parents. Sophia would be home soon, full of stories about her day. The foundation needed Isabella's signature on a dozen documents. DeLuca Holdings had a major acquisition closing next week that required Victor's attention. Life was full, complicated, demanding, but it was theirs, built from the ashes of a contract marriage that should have meant nothing, and somehow meant everything. As they headed inside to their son, their home, their life, Isabella felt Victor's hand find hers, a simple gesture that had become as natural as breathing. 5 years ago, she'd been invisible, a girl nobody noticed, whose worth was measured in debts owed. Now she was Isabella DeLuca, philanthropist, mother, partner to a man who'd transformed himself from criminal to legitimate business leader. She was visible, valued, powerful in ways that had nothing to do with fear or violence. She was exactly who she was meant to be, and so was he. Together, they'd built something extraordinary from the most unlikely foundation. A paper marriage that became real, a crime lord who chose legitimate power, a frightened girl who found her strength. Their story wasn't perfect. The past never completely disappeared, and there were still people who whispered about Victor's history, still challenges in running both an empire and a family. But those imperfections made their success sweeter, their partnership stronger, because they'd chosen each other, not out of obligation or debt or strategic necessity, but because somewhere between a courthouse wedding and a Mediterranean island, between kidnapping and rescue, between criminal empire and legitimate business, they'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love. And that love had transformed everything. It had saved them both. And it would carry them forward through whatever challenges came next for the rest of their lives. Together. Always together. The way it was meant to be from the very beginning, even when neither of them knew it yet.